In the shadow of a towering prison, a father bound by rage dragged his own daughter into the hills, tied her down, and executed her, not in secret, not in shame, openly. And as her blood kissed the earth moments after the blade fell, something struck him from the sky. What could possibly make a man slaughter his own child and believe he was right to do it? What kind of faith demands that level of sacrifice or vengeance? Long before cathedrals scraped the sky, there was Heliopolis. To live there was to serve power. To be born rich meant you owed the gods even more. And Dioscorus, he was a man who'd paid his dues. High-born, proud, he'd risen through the ranks of Roman nobility with coin, cunning, and cruelty. But behind the polished robes and polished words was a man ruled by one thing: fear. Fear of dishonor, fear of shame, fear of losing control, and nothing threatened that control more than his only child, Barbara. But to call her a daughter would be too generous. She was an heirloom, a sealed treasure, a body to be married off, bartered, or cloistered, whichever secured his legacy best. She was locked away in a tower high above the city, not for safety but for purity. No visitors, no influence but his. Can you imagine growing up in a world where love meant obedience, where silence was a sign of worth? To Dioscorus, this was fatherhood. To Barbara, it was a golden cage. But in that silence something else grew. Not rebellion, not hatred. Faith. Real faith. The kind that couldn't be bought, or owned, or broken. Barbara had everything a Roman noblewoman could want. Silk robes, golden bracelets that wrapped her wrists like chains, meals prepared by servants, brought on polished trays. But she wasn't fooled. She knew the difference between comfort and freedom. She wasn't content. She was watching, day after day, staring through the window slit in her tower. The city below danced to the rhythm of pagan ritual, incense rising to gods that never spoke, statues bathed in flowers that never moved. But something inside her was moving. It started small. A question, maybe whispered by a nursemaid too old to care who was listening, or a story passed on by a visitor, an early Christian in secret, planting ideas like seeds. What use is gold if it cages the soul? What God lives in a statue that cannot breathe, and in a city where faith was displayed in stone and marble? Barbara started believing in something she couldn't see. Not Jupiter, not Venus, not any god her father bowed to in public but forgot in private. It didn't show on her face, not yet. But inside that tower, inside that gilded silence, her rebellion had already begun. And the most terrifying thing about it made her calm. Because once the mind is free, the body doesn't stay caged for long. What would you do, locked in a tower, watched day and night, if you started to believe the truth was out there, but death would meet you the second you reached for it? Dioscorus was not a man to leave things half done. To keep Barbara isolated, he built a bathhouse, a private sanctuary where she could wash away the grime of the outside world, but never step beyond his watchful eye, a gilded cage within a cage. The bathhouse was more than bricks and water. It was a statement, a fortress of control, designed to remind Barbara, "You are mine." And the world outside means nothing to you. But Barbara saw it differently. When the bathhouse rose, she saw opportunity. She demanded something unexpected, a third window, not just two, but three. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. 3 openings, cut into stone, letting in the morning light, pure, untamed, and holy. To her, this was a silent prayer, a way to welcome a divine presence that her father could never cage. But to Dioscorus, those 3 windows weren't just holes in a wall. They were cracks, cracks in his dam of control. Cracks where chaos might seep through, threatening the rigid order of pagan gods and political power he worshipped like a tyrant, because the Trinity meant something he could not command. Order born from divine mystery, a unity beyond idols and statues. The old gods had their many faces, their many demands, but this was one God in 3 persons, a force that defied the fractured polytheism of Rome, calling for a singular faith and a singular truth. Barbara's bathhouse became more than a prison. It became a sanctuary of defiance, where the light could break in and the old world could begin to crumble. If you were Dioscorus, would you see those windows as a threat, or a daughter's last desperate hope? Dioscorus returned to the bathhouse. His eyes landed on the new window, the third one, a simple slit in stone, but to him it burned like a brand. He demanded answers. Why 3 windows? The question was more than curiosity, it was accusation. Barbara met his gaze, her voice steady, unbroken. Because I have seen the truth. Those words cut him deeply. They were a challenge, a refusal to accept the world as her father made it. Her confession was an act of rebellion, existential and raw. It meant she saw beyond the idols and gold, beyond the cages. She was no longer just a possession. She was a soul demanding freedom. And that shattered something inside Dioscorus. In a flash, his hand struck her face, with the fury of a man who saw his empire cracking. Then, cold and ruthless, he gave orders. Barbara was to be confined again. No more windows, no more light, and worse, her defiance could not go unanswered. He reported her to the authorities. The church, the very institution that held power over kings and fathers alike. A single word from Dioscorus could seal her fate. What would you do if the one who was supposed to protect you became your judge, when rebellion is punished not with reason, but with chains? Barbara's world cracked open, dragged from her tower, from her bathhouse, from the small sanctuary she had carved in stone. She was thrown before the Roman prefects, men cloaked in power and cruelty, men who saw her faith as rebellion, and rebellion as treason. They offered her a choice: to recant, deny the God she claimed to follow, return to the gods of stone and empire. But Barbara said no, not once, not even when the room grew cold with silence, not when the chains bit into her wrists. She refused. And then the punishment began. Iron, fire. The flesh was torn from her arms, bones bent beneath cruel hands. Every scream, every broken cry. They wanted to burn the spirit from her. But the truth is this: you cannot burn a flame from within. They tried to snuff it out, to crush it beneath iron and fire. But Barbara held on to that light. Her faith was more than belief. It was her identity. When they burned her flesh, they only made her stronger. But something no one expected happened next. The very instruments meant to break her betrayed the prefects. By morning, Barbara's wounds had begun to heal, not slowly, not with doctor's care, but overnight. Her broken flesh knitted as if touched by an unseen hand. Her cell, once cold and dark, began to glow with a strange light, not candlelight, not torchlight, something purer, divine. And when they tried to burn her again, the fire would not take. Flames licked the wood and stone, but not her skin. Water rushed from the walls, an impossible spring, cooling, cleansing, defying all logic. The people began to whisper, "Is she blessed or cursed?" Her suffering had become a spectacle. Even the instruments of pain refused to do their work, and the prefects, once certain of their power, grew afraid, because in that prison, under the watchful eyes of Rome, heaven was watching, and it was not silent. If you were standing there, would you believe the impossible, or would you fear what it meant? The trial ended with a sentence from the authorities: death, not just as punishment, but as a message. Dioscorus stepped forward, not to protest against the sentence, not to plead mercy. He volunteered, better by his hand than a stranger's, a father's final role, the moment the world seemed to hold its breath. Barbara did not scream. She did not plead. Instead, she bowed her head and prayed, "Father, forgive me, and may God forgive you." Then the blade fell. Steel met flesh. Her head hit the cold stone floor. The cathedral was still, until thunder rumbled above, shaking the walls, as if the heavens themselves were speaking, a storm born of blood and faith. What do you think passed between them in that final moment? Was it anger, regret, or something impossible to forgive? Dioscorus made his way down the mountain, his steps heavy with the weight of finality. But the sky was not silent. Without warning, a bolt of lightning ripped across the blue, shattering the calm like a crack in the very fabric of fate. It struck him down, not just with light, but with a consuming fire. He burned. Bones blackened. Flesh turned to ash. No tombstone to mark his fall, no legacy to whisper his name. He had ended a saint. But the storm ended him. After the storm faded, Valentinus, a local Christian, risked everything. He took Barbara's body, fragile, broken, yet unbowed, away from the eyes of the authorities. No grand ceremony, no marble tomb, just a secret place, a hidden burial beneath the soil. But that grave, it became more than a resting place. It grew into a sanctuary. Whispers began to spread. Soft murmurs at first, then voices raised in hope. Where she rested, wounds healed. Where she lay, fear dissolved. Her death wasn't the end. It was a beginning, the spark that set fire to faith itself. Have you ever heard how a place can hold power? How silence can speak louder than words? This grave held both, and it called the world to witness. Barbara's story didn't fade into the dust of forgotten history. It exploded into legend. Her image was painted on chapel walls, soft eyes staring out from frescoes bathed in candlelight. Visions of her appeared, not just to monks or priests, but to common folk trembling in fear and hope alike. Soldiers claimed to see her in the chaos of battle, a silent guardian in shining armor guiding their blades. Miracles rippled outward, like stones cast into a still lake, each wave touching new lives, new hearts. Her faith became a beacon, a living flame passed from generation to generation, and long after the stones of her prison crumbled, Barbara's spirit burned on. What is it about stories like hers that refuses to die? Is it faith? Is it hope? Or is it the undeniable power of one soul who dared to believe, even in the face of death? From the shadows of that hidden grave, Barbara's name traveled. Cathedrals rose in her honor, their stained glass windows glowing with her face, her story etched in stone and light. Bells were cast bearing her name, their ringing a call to remember, to believe, to stand firm when all else seems lost. The woman they tried to silence, the girl trapped behind walls of stone and fear, now speaks across centuries. Her voice, carried by wind and faith, reminds us that even in death, a single spark can ignite the world. What part of Barbara's story lingers with you? Is it the courage, the faith, or the truth that even the smallest light can pierce the darkest night? Over time, Barbara became more than a name. She became a protector. Miners digging deep into the earth's dark veins whispered her name before each descent, seeking courage when the ground threatened to swallow them whole. Artillerymen standing amid thunder and fire called on her spirit, a shield against sudden death that lurked in every blast. Those who faced peril, the sudden, the unpredictable, found in her a guardian. Because saints aren't born, they are forged, broken, and made immortal through the scars they carry and the legends they leave behind. Barbara's story is not just of faith, but of resilience, a reminder that sometimes it's in the breaking that we become whole. Have you ever faced a moment where the only choice was to stand firm or fall? What story would you want whispered after you're gone? Barbara's legacy lives in every act of courage when fear threatens to silence us. In every moment we choose conviction over comfort, in every sacred act of defiance against a world that tries to cage the soul. She lit a match in the darkness, and the world still glows with its fire. Her story reminds us that one life, one flame, can change the course of history. And long after the last stone falls, the light she kindled will never go out. What fire will you carry? In a world still ruled by fear, would you speak your truth? Would you build that third window? Knowing full well the sword waits just beyond the light, what price would you pay for freedom of the soul, for faith that refuses to be silenced? Think on that. Because Barbara's story isn't just history, it's a mirror. A question we all must face. If you enjoyed this, like the video and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.